Rorschach issue 7, Tom King and Jorge Fornes on the art. Or how the kid and the old man, how they got the idea to try and kill Turley. And what a story it is.
This one got so weird. Look, this is usually my favorite book the week it comes out. I'm still processing my feelings on it because I read it this morning. It's always the last thing I read, but I had a busy week. So I read it when I woke up this morning, which maybe was a mistake. But yeah, I was not ready for the direction this was going in.
Yeah, so we ended last issue with the investigator coming to this house where the letters came from that were dropped off. And someone dressed in a Rorschach mask opens the door, and that's where we start here. And offers him and makes going Matt. And he comes in. Pacing's very good in the art here as well. And he starts talking to him, saying it's not his letters, and he describes what brought him here, how he met Myerson the first time. We see he's got like a pirate painting on his wall, all these things. And he tells this story. So the guy who lived here, this was a comic book writer who did other stories and was friends with Myerson, and talks about how after he stopped being a comic book writer, he became someone who was kind of obsessed with UFOs and stuff like that, and deciphering things and conspiracies and whatnot. And basically says that he believed he could hear, was it his daughter, I think?
Yeah.
So he believed that he could hear and communicate with the dead, almost like a seance, but instead a bit more of like a technology style version of it, where
so this is a real thing. So we watch enough ghost shows and stuff, and I listen to enough paranormal. The EVP is a thing people do, and it never works for me. I never hear what they claim to be listening to, but this is a thing that people do use. But you're right, it is like an electronic seance, and I guess that's the best way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, to put it simple, it's like an old style tape recorder. You press record, you ask the potential spirit a question, and you just let them, give them some time to answer, and then you listen back to the tape, and it's just it's just white noise. But people will claim possibly to hear something in there, and this writer invited the character, because we don't know who this character in the mask is. We see him as a young man here, but it's very intentionally not told to us yet who this is.
Right.
And he's here as a young man before he's done anything in his life. We find out later, of course, that he became a comic book writer himself, and he had one big book, sometime later. But he's here. He's been invited along with Myerson, who at this time is maybe more middle-aged than an old man. And they're here for this, and they have this kind of seance style thing where this guy's saying, "Hey, this is happening. I can speak to my daughter," and they kind of dismiss it a little bit. They think he's a little bit crazy as they're leaving. And this young man, whoever this guy is in the Rorschach mask, says that he never really seen him that much again. He sent him a letter after his own comic book came out asking for his thoughts, but he didn't seem to like it very much, and that was kind of the extent of their interaction until one day when he showed up at the door dressed as Rorschach with the kid, with Laura, and we see what this guy looks like now. Presumably he's got like a white beard, he's got a bald head, and he invites them in, and they're at first he's scared. He's like, you're gonna kill me. No, we're not gonna kill you, but we like a hot drink, kind of thing.
It's raining, we should say too.
It's raining, yeah. And they come in and they want to use this tape recorder again. Myerson's remembered this. He wants to do this, and he wants to listen to the static. And then this is where it gets a little bit crazy, because he mentions that he believes that Dr. Manhattan, whatever was heard that day, was actually Dr. Manhattan sending a message back through time to be heard on this tape recorder.
Yeah.
So
each person, as they tell the story, hears something different, right?
Yes.
Which speaks to the power of suggestion in the mind and all that stuff.
And I love these.
At this point in the story, I don't know exactly what to believe.
Yeah, and I love this page for the record. I love, Manhattan. Like he's on. And this is obviously just his version of events, but he's telling Manhattan's on Mars, and he holds up his arm and he fires a beam, and we see the beam sort of go to the Earth and then like land in the house and into the tape recorder on the day that they did this years ago.
Right.
And the idea is that over the years, Myerson's been listening to this, and over time and time, because we see him sort of age. Like there's like a series of panels where he's listening to the static, and I will say I'm a little mad at this book because it was making me look at these like letters representing the static to see if I could see anything like in the text.
Me too.
I was like, is there any hidden messages in there? Can I make out any words? And yeah, and Myerson says that Will is the mask and this is my face. But very Batman-esque, Bruce Wayne is the mask, this is kind of thing. So this man, clicks the tape, they record, they listen, they play it back. And he explains that, once the assassination attempt happened, he sought out who was investigating. He went to the apartment where Myerson lived. He found out that this investigator was there. He found him at the hotel, left the letters to sort of open a line of dialogue. And so we don't know why he's in a Rorschach mask, right? This is the thing.
No.
In the entire backstory, there's not really anything built into him being dressed like Rorschach. But he talks about how he put his book out in 1985. And some of the things that he's talking about here is that his book was a very serious take on pirates. So, and we've talked about, whenever you talk about Watchmen, you talk about how the pirates are kind of this world's version of superheroes. They're very popular. And he talks about how, when I was a kid, I loved Pontius Pirate, but when I grew up, I wanted to do my own more realistic, dark, not silly version.
Right.
And he's talking about that. And it came out, and then it was only, days, weeks later that the New York squid attack happened. Because that's the other thing, is that when he's talking about Manhattan and he's talking about everything, they're under the belief still that the squid was a real thing, and they don't know it came from Manhattan himself.
From Ozymandias.
Yes. Or from Ozymandias, sorry, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because they say here that when you go back to those, is that we never understood the power of the squid. Why did the squid succeed? Why didn't Manhattan stop them? The answer was simple. He couldn't. They were more powerful than he even was. Can you imagine? And again, that ties into their fear of the squids coming back, the whole series and all that, right? So you've got this guy talking about how he released this comic book in the 80s. There was a serious version of the fun pirate characters that existed for so long. And then he regretted it because the whole point of the pirates was to inspire children and to see things. Mm-hmm. And, you're getting all this. And then, of course, you finally... I mean, maybe it's actually before this you get the name. It is. You've been holding it from the viewers and listeners.
I've been holding it because out of nowhere in the middle of this issue, they mentioned that this comic book writer is named Frank Miller. And I was like, wait, what?
And it is Frank Miller. Like,
when you guys kind of teased this at the start of the show, I was like, I just need to go and read what the hell happened in this issue.
Yes.
So I read the cliff notes of this Frank Miller bit, and I'm like, what the shit?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, I don't know if that's me missing context because I read the cliff notes.
No, because
it's just what the shit.
No. Because they go to him and
it's what the shit in the terms that it's Frank Miller. Everything that the story is doing though makes complete sense and thematically fits into the context of everything that's going on.
Yes.
It's just instead of like having a fake thing, they just said, you know what, we're just going to actually call him, because clearly this pirate book he made was the pirate version of Dark Knight Returns. That's what they're talking about.
Right. Because it was called the Dark Fife Returns.
Yes.
And that he was a flute playing pirate, and that was his whole thing, and he darkened him up and it became a huge hit. And when you look at the painting on his wall, it's essentially the Dark Knight Returns vibe. Where'd it go? Damn it.
It's earlier in the issue.
It's earlier in the issue. Yeah, it's got the lightning strike with the pirate standing on the one side with a field of bad pirates, you would assume. And so there's all this stuff, right? But then I started looking up the Otto Binder stuff too, because they talk about Captain Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
So, which means that the concept of Captain Marvel lived in the world of Watchmen before, right? And that Otto Binder. So this stuff that King puts in here, I don't know about the the EVP seances and stuff, all that, but yeah, Binder did lose his daughter to a car accident, and it kind of broke him, and that was the end of things. So the fact that King's going back and adding real life stuff into this Watchmen book, sequel book, you could say, that's he's almost breaking down comic history through the concept of breaking down comic history.
And yeah, I mean, Watchmen was always, this, take on superheroes and comic books to a point anyway. So it's very sort of in theme to do that. The big thing, I guess, the one thing that explains why Frank Miller is now wearing a Rorschach mask in this present day part of the book is, when at the end of the issue he plays the tape for the investigator, and now he's saying, you can hear it right clear as day, God talking, and the final panel is him saying, it says, kill Turley. So
it's God Alan Moore.
And to me, what all this was is that a lot of this book has been about how conspiracies form, how people who need to fixate on something kind of form those ideas and then spread them and believe in them so devoutly. And this is showing to me that the kid and Myerson kind of fed into each other, and it kind of spread to Frank Miller, where after all this he's starting to really buy into this too. And I'm talking about the character Frank Miller and this, not actual Frank Miller, although I mean maybe he's crazy, I have no idea. But
there are some not so good things.
I do know that King is actually fairly good friends with Frank Miller. So this will not be like a shock to him to find himself in this
I have no doubt that this was cleared with Miller before they put this in here. No doubt.
Even if whatever it does with him is theoretically damning to him, I'm sure it was done with his blessing.
Yeah, I think you have because it is worth mentioning. When we talk about the revolution of comic books in the 80s and things getting more dark and more nuanced, Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns are the two things that always come up. So to sort of involve a Frank Miller, I mean,
you had no chance to get Alan Moore's permission, did you?
Well, I'd say allegory, but I mean, is it an allegory at this point when he's just called Frank Miller?
No, but it kind of is, because he uses, and I don't know if Miller has said this though, where he says that he feels like Dark Fight Returns was almost a mistake, because then it perverted the idea of what the pirates were, right? That they were meant to create this hope and aspirational aspect for kids, Yeah,
basically what he says, he regrets that it's influenced comic books in the way it has, because now everything's trying to be this darker thing.
I wouldn't be surprised if he does feel that way. In fact, I'm pretty sure Alan Moore feels that way in the things that he has said when he used to speak.
Well, Alan Moore just doesn't, and I don't want to piss off the Dark Wizard, so if this gets to him, I'm not being disrespectful, right? But I just feel like Alan Moore just is upset about the world, right? Like,
he is sick of being asked the same questions over and over.
And I get it, but at the same time, you can't say that modern comics exist partially due to him. Like, he dragged them into that era with his Swamp Thing and even his DC work before Watchmen, So, and even his Superman stuff though wasn't like this dark, grim, gritty deconstruction. They were just really good Superman stories. His Green Lantern too. So like,
no, I mean, I think this is a case where these writers know exactly what they were doing, and it's a case we get with every medium. It's to a certain extent where their voices and what they did are so important in dragging the quality of writing and the way that we tell stories forward in the industry. But as with everything like that and with success, a lot of the industry take the wrong lessons as to why these things worked and why they were successful. It's further playing with the ideas of how these ideas spread and conspiracies and belief, and this idea that we all hear something different and they're just listening to static, which as far as we can tell has nothing. Now it is a comic book, so it could turn out there is something really there, but it doesn't seem like there is right now.
No, it's basically whatever they want it to be, right? Like for Otto Binder, it was the voice of his dead daughter, right? And now for all these other people, it's basically what the kid wanted to hear and what Meyerson wanted to hear, and I still expect there to be some kind of twist.
I suppose the one interesting thing is that Meyerson, the kid, and now Miller all seem to hear the same thing on it, which maybe that's saying something about like-minded people and like how ideas spread, as because it's in the same way that he's now dressed as Rorschach. Like this is literally spread to someone else.
Right. Yeah, it was a doozy because just with King, and I was thinking about King's backlog of stuff of deconstruction, and you almost feel like that's kind of his take too of whatever Frank Miller's saying of the deconstruction is kind of taking this aspirational thing. So when you look about his Superman, which was what Up in the Sky, it is all of that. It is about the idea of Superman being aspirational and going through the impossible to basically save this little girl.
And maybe that's, I don't know if it's getting super meta in this sense, but again, the idea of spreading of the idea is the idea of Rorschach spreading here, or the paranoia of Rorschach and that mission.
Right.
Is that in some way representing this infection of comic books by we all have to be dark and serious now, and we can't have the more hopeful versions of things?
And that's the whole thing where I look about like what kind of forecast was Tom King looking at where this was going to come out right at the time where this is kind of in the discussion in pop culture right now, because you got The Boys, you have the Snyder Cut, you have other things going on, like.
I think we've been building this for quite a few years now, to be fair.
Yeah. But like, he looked at that and went, "Hey, we're gonna pull this off in this story,"
Yeah, I didn't mean that to put King down. I think that's that isn't a problem for him to have seen the trend and gone, right, I'm going to write a story with that. More just, I don't think he was like a super wizard telling the future. I think he looked at where things were going and kind of now it just seems more because there's more of it.
And there's the page where the regret really comes in. It's over pages of Pontius. It's just sort of like it's close up on black, and then it pulls out and it's his eye and it keeps pulling out. But it's like one of the old Pontius comics. But basically, it's where Miller's describing how a few weeks or a few months after his book came out that was praised, the squid thing happened, and there was like footage in the news of all these bodies lying around with blood, and it's very the way he describes sounds like the painting we see in his wall earlier on,
right?
And it basically sounds like, and it's not so much that he feels responsible. It's not like this was inspired by his comic, but more the point that maybe superhero comics shouldn't reflect the darkness of the real world, because that's not, or in this case pirate, actually superhero, because I'm thinking of the real stuff, but maybe the pirate comic shouldn't reflect the darkness and the misery of the real world, because the point is to believe in hope and believe in something better. So despite how dark this story is about these like crazy people who are trying to assassinate someone and the psychosis that gets them to that point, there's a weird hopeful kind of message in the middle of all of it kind of emerging, which is very impressive. So I think this issue, especially with how we feel, I mean, I'm okay with dark versions of a lot of superheroes. I'm okay with a lot of the headier takes and things, and Tom King himself writes a lot of the headier takes in some of these characters,
right?
But there's definitely a thing we have an issue with, I think, as a group of fans, where we recognize where they insist on doing characters certain ways now because they don't see the old ways as working, and they want to be more popular or grittier or edgier, and it comes off a certain way. And I think this issue is almost like tailor-made for our sensibilities and what it's poking at.
And I brought up Otto Binder with the Shazam stuff too, because when you think about Shazam, and that's all about a hopeful kid, right? And it's like, it stands out in a world of superheroes even still, nowadays. But, you look back in the 50s, 60s, like, it was outselling Superman at certain points. That's why DC bought up Fawcett Comics. So And I don't know if that was before or after, but he did the Captain Marvel stuff. They bring it up here, so yeah. There's a whole lot here that I was not expecting.
Yeah, I was reminded this week of the Grant Morrison quote where he talks about how if you show a kid a cartoon with singing crabs in it, the kid doesn't question. They know it's not real. They know crabs don't really sing, but they don't question why crabs are singing. But if you give an adult a work of fiction, they start questioning every little goddamn detail and why it works. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's not real. The story has a point. It doesn't have to work. And
this was in rules. It was in his Super Gods book. And when I was rereading it last year, I actually took a picture of that page, I believe, and posted it on Twitter. It's like, God damn it. Like, why can people not get this?
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
Also, I should read his Super Gods book. It's real good.
But, yes, so this was a phenomenal issue that prodded at things. It made the mystery intriguing as well, but it, in the delusion of believing Manhattan sent a message like to do this. I don't know, everything about it is just so wild. But then you add in all this meta stuff, the comic book industry, the critique of superheroes and how they're portrayed now, and maybe the regret of like what the darkness has caused. But at the same time, I don't think any of us look at Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns in year one and say, oh, we wish they didn't exist, because they're also still some of the best stuff that's ever been written, and there's a lot of good things that have came from them and the way it advanced the industry. But there's so many things that have altered for the worse because of how people say now, oh, but now we don't want to do lighter stories, we don't want to do more fun,
hopeful
stories.
It's the sort of thing that is not exclusive to this medium. It happens in all creative endeavors. I talk about Blair Witch as an example all the time. In that, for a long time, I kind of despised Blair Witch because of what it led to with the boom of these cheap found footage movies. Because they were cheap to make, anyone could do it, and everyone did, and most of them were terrible. But that's not Blair Witch's fault. It was still good. Yeah. And it's the same way here, where it's not Frank Miller's fault, it's not Alan Moore's fault that the rest of the industry misunderstood. Like, they still made good works of art and should be applauded for that.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking, recently in the scheme of Batman comics, we did year one. And right afterwards, it jumps back to normal, like nothing's changed. There is a pretty hefty lag period between these seminal works and then the rest of the industry catching up.
Well, I mean, especially in the case of comic books, it's not like the writer who's doing the next issue of Batman. I mean, they're probably writing that at the same time Miller's writing year one. They have no idea. I mean, maybe they have like a vague story because the editor said, oh, this is where Batman is going or whatever, but they don't know what the impact's going to be. For
a large part, those late 80s comics, or mid to late 80s Batman comics, a lot of them are indistinguishable in terms of its presentation from early 70s comics.
Yeah. It's just the 90s where things really start to shift. But
there's a good lag period.
But that's just the time of inspiration and the time of influence to really play. But I mean, regardless, just to get back to Rorschach to wrap this up. It's a wonderful issue, and I think it pokes at a lot of things, and I think this is my favorite current Tom King book, and I know that's saying a lot because Strange Adventures is great, but I think this is taking the top spot. Every time we talk about it, I end up liking it more than when I read it, and I like it a lot when I'm reading it.
I do that with most Tom King books, I think.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, I like them less if in the case of Heroes in Crisis.
Sure, well, I mean,
we don't talk about that.
That's an outlier. That is. That's an outlier.
We don't talk about that one.
Matt, what are you rating Rorschach 7?
I'm gonna give this a 9.
I'm gonna go 9.5.
Yeah.
So there you go.